Welcome to this week's edition of the Webster Tarpley program on Unbound Radio. Now, the big news of the week worldwide continues to be austerity, the worldwide battle against killer cuts, genocidal reductions in government services, pensions, health care, and other vital programs that keep hundreds of millions of people alive and which are actually guaranteeing the future of a labor force worthy of the name. And just now, today, Obama has sent his budget to Congress, and this now completes the process begun on the day of infamy last Wednesday, when Obama actually distributed in writing for the first time a Democratic president, a Democratic administration who plans to gouge, chisel, loot, sack, and undermine those key entitlement programs, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and by implication, all the rest, because once those fall, all the rest are vulnerable. That is the big news, and I urge you to remain focused on the big picture and not on diversions launched by the enemy in any form. And I guess at that point, we've got to address the Boston events. Now, the context for the Boston events is, of course, that the Obama administration, as we've just been talking about, is carrying out a sharp right turn, a reactionary turn. Obama, of course, always the most right-wing of all the Democratic candidates, right? Way to the right of Edwards, who wanted to stop all foreclosures with a federal law. Way to the right of Hillary, even, who wanted to have a voluntary halt to foreclosures. Obama in favor of letting the foreclosure process burn itself out. The most right-wing of all the Republican candidates, of all the Democratic candidates, in 2008, became the president, neoliberal, pro-banker, a Wall Street puppet. And I've shown that exhaustively in Obama the Postmodern Coup, the making of a Manchurian candidate in the spring of 2008, and then Barack H. Obama, the unauthorized biography in August of 2008. And all of that is now playing itself out, down to the attack on Social Security. You'll find in the Obama the Postmodern Coup, a leaflet I did in February 2008, so that's 5 years ago now, for the Potomac primary here in the capital area, Maryland, Virginia, D.C., warning that Obama would attack Social Security, that he would cut pensions and attack the elderly, the sick, the helpless. And that's now what he's doing. So, a sharp right turn. Obama, always a warmonger, right? The drone presidency. Liberticide laws. This is a liberticide administration. Very good word. It's applied originally to people in Britain after the Napoleonic Wars who wanted a dictatorship. So we got liberticide measures all over the place. Obama does them. Maybe even more serious than these. No recovery program. Obama has zero recovery program, and now he's trying to shift the cost of the Depression onto the most helpless, right? The widows, the widowers, the old, the sick, the crippled, and so forth. But he's got to have cover in the process, and the cover has been coming through these outside events. So when you're looking at what needs or what ulterior goals might be served by something like these Boston events, right? If they are a false flag, we don't really know that yet, but there are some indications. Then you've got to look at the actual operations of the Obama administration and the reactionary Republicans that are being shielded or facilitated by these kinds of events. So this is the principal issue for today. And we'll be back in just a minute here on the Webster Tarpley program on Unbound Radio. Welcome back to the Webster Tarpley program here on Unbound Radio. Now let's bore into this Boston event to some degree. It is obviously suspicious. It obviously presents significant flaws, let's say, as a media narrative, if that's what we have to call it. We're struck by the fact that there were no warnings, no chatter, no suspects, no arrests. The authorities are calling for individuals to come forward with films. The authorities, in short, claim to know nothing. Certainly a bitter result after all those hundreds of billions of dollars poured into this mastodontic post-9/11 national security state. Right? We had a map of all those top secret facilities published in the Washington Post a while ago, this archipelago of Beltway bandits who are cashing in on all of this, and they don't have any indication that it's coming. And indeed, there is an atmosphere of negligence around this, right? The bomb supposedly in a trash can. Why were there trash cans in the first place? What is the point of that? Lots and lots of sensitive targets don't have trash cans anymore. We're told that this took place inside a security cordon that had been set up with sniffer dogs, with spotters, and nevertheless, two suspicious packages apparently, or backpacks, were introduced into this cordoned off area. In particular, we have an Australian national who works as the running coach of the University of Mobile in Alabama, Ali Stevenson, who tells us that as he was standing there, part of the proceedings, right, he was in the race, he said he saw sniffer dogs, he saw rooftop spotters or snipers, heightened security, and repeated announcements on the public address system that it was a training exercise, just a drill. Now, of course, whenever there's a drill, this also increases our level of suspicion. So therefore, this has lots and lots of problems. However, there's also this question: what are we supposed to do about it? Well, some people say this is a warning to Elizabeth Warren, the senator from Massachusetts, because her attacks on the banks are becoming too daring, too radical. There might conceivably be something in that. But then there's also this question of a Saudi citizen, a student who was seen around this area and then was running towards or running away from the bomb, as so many others were, and was then apprehended. Some guy decided to knock him down and take him to the police. Perhaps a vigilante. God knows what mental processes led this guy to do that. But the the hysterical quest to capture Arabs now seems to be out in the open. So on the one side, you got Michael Savage and his radio program demanding that all Arabs be rounded up. That's one view. I would reject that. And then we've got on the other side people saying, well, this is obviously, it took place on tax day. It's being attributed to anti-government militias or white supremacists or other gun grabbers. So we're told that the purpose of all this is essentially to facilitate the gun grabbing. So I would say reject the Arab optic. I think this is largely leading us in the wrong direction, and reject this gun grabber stuff. Again, you ought to go back and look at what has been the net result of the December Connecticut shootings, the Newtown, Connecticut Sandy Hook school. This has provided Obama in particular with left cover that he has used really shamelessly, relentlessly, to wrap himself in that issue, which allows him to solidify his own liberal base just at the time that he needs that cover the most. Now, whatever these terror events are, shooting events are in themselves, we may not always know, but what we can know for sure is how they are used in the propaganda sphere. And since the Newtown events, you've essentially got this polarization into two bankrupt, asinine, duped groups. On the one hand, the gun fetishists who think that everything revolves around guns. I'm reminded, if you look back in the history of the National Rifle Association, the clique that took over the National Rifle Association a little bit before 1980, one of their ideological points was that the Kennedy assassination, John Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King, all of those assassinations were really motivated by only one thing, to provide a pretext for a confiscation of firearms. And I think that is asinine and to the 99th degree. Let's just leave it at that. We could spend some more denigration on it, but you get the idea. If you are out there as a gun fetishist, you have made yourself into a dupe of the reactionary Republicans, whether it be Boehner or Rubio or Rand Paul or any of them. And if you're on the Obama side, right, if you're the gun demonizer, then you've made yourself into a dupe for Obama. So the wedge issue functions in a way as to divide the American people and to increase their loyalty to these bankrupt political formations. And what we're seeking to do is the opposite, to break the identification with Republicans or Democrats and look out for the entitlement issues, right, which enjoy 90%, 80 to 90% support in many cases. So if we look at the whole history of these things under Obama, we'll see that there was an upturn in this violence back in 2009 in particular, right, when you had the Fort Hood in November 2009. It's actually in the summer of 2009. You have this question of the 33rd Avenue Mosque in Queens, and the young guy who drove cross country and was somehow implicated in an attempt to put bombs in the subway. We have the Nidal Hassan case, Fort Hood, November 2009. We have Mutalab, the underwear bomber in the skies of Detroit, December 25th, 2009. May 2010, the Faisal Shahad attempt to attack New York City, Pakistani origins alleged, and somewhere in there you've also got the Times Square New Year's Eve bomber. But I would suggest that the character of these events is actually changing, and we'll talk about that in a minute, from what it was under Bush. Under Bush, the terror event was a direct incitement to a foreign war. In this case, I regard it as a diversion, as something that is designed to lead you away from the real issues, where a popular majority is available, could be assembled, and would be extraordinarily good. It leads you into this blind alley, the gun fetishists against the gun demonizers, and that essentially resolves itself into futility, into nothingness, and it banalizes and dumbs down the people that go along with it. So I would urge people to take some steps back from this, and remember that what is actually at stake, right? What the ruling elite actually fears is the mass strike process. That when you've got this austerity going on through the sequester. Let me just say a couple of words about what we have in terms of the sequester, because it's very, very draconian, right? We're getting new things about the sequester really every week. We're going to have cuts in Pentagon TRICARE, and that's for the lucky people from the Pentagon who are not on Social Security disability, or some of them, there may be some overlap, but the Pentagon TRICARE is their dedicated medical insurance. That's going to be cut by Obama. There's also an attempt by the Obama administration to start a new BRAC, a Base Realignment and Closing Committee. The last one was in 2005. Now they want to have another one. I can remember the last one in 2005 led to the shutdown of Walter Reed Army Hospital, which was an excellent medical facility on Georgia Avenue in the district. They had the best trauma center. They had the best rehabilitation for people who had lost limbs, amputees, and so forth. But that had to be shut down, and they claim that they rebuilt it at the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda. But no, you've lost the hospital. I'm sorry. It may have been consolidated someplace else. We're also told that Obama is going to attack Food for Peace, the Eisenhower administration program. Remember, the United States provides half of all emergency food aid in the world, and that is something to be proud of, not to attack, not to denigrate like Rand Paul and Ron Paul, who want to shut those things down. Any proposal to cut the Food for Peace program is a genocidal proposal from the word go. And that's what Rand is demanding, but also now Obama. Obama essentially wants to have a major shakeup of the Food for Peace program and dedicate one half of the money to local food purchases. That is to say, instead of shipping grain from the United States, buy it in one part of Ethiopia to ship it to some other part of Ethiopia. And I think that is a recipe for disaster, because what you want to do is increase the net availability of food in other parts of the world. And if you can, if there's food there to be bought, then let somebody buy it. But if you want to increase the saturation of food in the region, you better have food deliveries direct from the U.S. in ships. Sure, U.S. ships, why not? You might as well have a merchant marine and possibly also airlifts bringing it in. We're even told that the Smithsonian Institution, a museum here in Washington, people know it, right? It's where the spirit of St. Louis, of Lindbergh, and some other interesting artifacts are displayed. Their budget is going to be cut by $41 million, and there are going to be fewer exhibitions for people to see. So when you look at austerity, it's an impoverishment of the cultural and material life of a whole population. That is what the sequester is doing. Now, Obama wants to pile on top of that more Social Security cuts. He'll bring his total Medicare gouging to $1.1 trillion. This is obscene beyond words. Well, then maybe, especially in the springtime, there might be some mass resistance. Maybe people come out. Maybe it might be students coming out and saying, look, we are sick of being crushed under high-interest student loan debt, right? 3.5% or 7%. You remember Ron Paul thanked his young supporters when that bill came up. Should the interest rate on the student loans be doubled, Rand Paul voted yes, double it. Screw my own supporters. So Obama is now following in the footsteps of Ron Paul in terms of attacking his own base. So, in summary, we got to get a mass movement. You can't get a mass movement around a war issue. That's the lesson of the 1960s. You can't get it around a false flag issue. You can get it around mass traction economic issues. So I'm recommending that obviously skepticism is in order, analysis is in order, but not something like going into a huge signature gathering campaign, let's get 30,000 signatures and force the state of Massachusetts to conclude that this was actually a false flag inside job. I think that would be an exercise in futility, precisely because you've got a mass movement that's just waiting to be formed around these mass traction economic demands. And we'll look into this a little bit more now as the program continues. In just a minute, the Webster Tarpley program on Unbound Radio. Welcome back to the next segment here of Unbound Radio, the Webster Tarpley program. Please bear with us. We're having some technical difficulties. Anyway, there it is in a nutshell. Right? Plenty of things that look bad. I would also point to one interesting observation. Congressman Peter King, liberal, reactionary Republican of New York, and what he says is that the budget cuts have gone too far, that the police and other first responders have been cut under the sequester and other provisions, and that has now gone too far. There's an interesting angle. If you want to respond to this politically, you could say, well, what were the budget arrangements there under Deval Patrick and so forth? Police austerity might sound good to some people, anti-government types, but not a good thing. And then just the negligence, right? Why were there trash cans? Why are trash cans allowed at all? In the New York City subway, around downtown Washington, there are no trash cans left. You can try that if you've got some messy piece of, hot dog wrapper or something. There's no place to get rid of it. So, let's then just try to wrap this up. Suppose this turns out to be a false flag. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to reorient the whole agitation towards that? Are you going to go out and start gathering tens of thousands of signatures to force the state of Massachusetts to have some kind of an investigation? No, you're not going to do that, are you? Instead, what you have to do is have your own strategy. And having your own strategy means you've made up your mind well before this, based on the underlying tendencies of this whole epoch that we're living through, that there are some things you cannot do. You cannot organize a mass movement based on a foreign war, unless it's a war of the dimensions of World War I in Europe or something like that. You must get a mass movement, because if you don't get a mass movement with progressive contents, then you get nowhere. So a method based on a foreign war won't work. The other one that will not work is a method based on a false flag event. That is the lesson of the previous decade. From 2001 to 2007, 2008, there was something of a mass movement about 9/11 and around the impeachment of Bush and Cheney. And instead, that didn't turn out well at all, right? And it essentially, in some ironic ways, you can say one of the main beneficiaries of all that was little Rand Paul, who now wants to use his father's mailing list and his father's notoriety, which was fueled by some very naive and very misguided people in the 9/11 Truth Movement who thought that Ron Paul was an answer to false flag events. Well, maybe that put little Rand where he is now, hoping to contend for the presidency. We'll be back in just a minute here on Unbound Radio. Welcome back to the Webster Tarpley program here on Unbound Radio. So we've wrapped up this Boston issue in the following terms. No matter what it is, let us remember that nothing works in the time ahead of us without a mass movement. You better have a mass movement, and it's got to be an anti-fascist, progressive mass movement. It's got to be capable of leading humanity out of the world economic depression, of saving human civilization with all the cultural and political values that are associated with that. It cannot be done based on a foreign war, other than a war of proportions which are not visible in the current world, although which certainly could emerge at different times. It cannot be done based on a false flag event, even one thousands of times bigger than the one we've just gone through. The only way you can organize such a mass movement is using mass traction economic demands. And if there's anything that can be said about these events, right, from Newtown to the Boston Marathon, we will say that whatever they are in themselves, their use by the Obama administration, by the reactionary Republicans, is to divert you from the mass traction economic demands. And that is, I think, where the difference comes in. Under Bush, terrorist acts lead directly into foreign wars. So at that rate, the refutation and demolition of the 9/11 argument, for example, had an immediate relevance to attempting to build a mass movement, which it succeeded at least to some degree in around 2006, 2007. But in this case, the event, as the Newtown story shows us, leads you into a blind alley. It leads you into an utterly futile, useless, and pointless collision between the gun fetishists and the gun demonizers. And in effect, what it does is it increases the fidelity, the allegiance of various pieces of the U.S. political spectrum, increases their allegiance to the existing political parties. Whereas what we want to do is lead them against the existing political parties. Now, how do we do that? Well, 80 to 90% of the American people want their economic rights. They regard Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and other programs, things like unemployment benefits, food stamps, Head Start, breakfasts for kids, WIC, protein meals for expectant mothers, and so forth. They see those as their economic rights. They own them. They have paid for them, and they own them. The great irony of American politics, once again, is no political party is willing to fight for the things that the overwhelming majority of Americans want. You want to know why there's partisanship and division? It's because there's no New Deal entitlement party which would immediately have the potential, at least, of enjoying, 2/3 to 3/4 to 9/10 of the American people. So I would urge you, keep your eyes fixed on this in very brutal military terms. When you're in military operations, if you want to consider politics under that light, in politics as in other pursuits, you stick to your own strategy. You do not go running after every little thing that the enemy throws at you, every diversion. You do not let yourself be diverted, and you do not choose to go and commit yourself to fighting on the terrain chosen by the enemy. You try to choose that terrain yourself. So therefore, for all of these reasons, I would urge that you keep your attention focused on what happened today. The Obama budget was sent to the Congress, and that's the one that's got the chained consumer price index, and it's got the $400 billion in Medicare cuts. Now, I say $400 billion in Medicare cuts. It's something like $370 billion more in Medicare cuts and $30 billion in other medical benefits. I suspect the Veterans Administration, the Pentagon TRICARE, and other things come in there. And what Obama did today in sending that budget, I think was revealing. He tried to play one generation against the other. But and this is it's a theme that has been developed by Peter Peterson of Lehman Brothers. Peter Peterson of Lehman Brothers and his Peterson Institute of International Economics over on Massachusetts Avenue across from the Brookings Institution. They say, let's play the old against the young. Let's play the people starting out against the retirees. I say no. Let's unite the entire population, ultimately the 99%, against the 1% of people like Peter Peterson, the former head of Lehman Brothers, and his tribe of hack austerity ghouls. So Obama says we want to save the entitlements, but we've got to make sure that not too much money goes to the elderly at the expense of the young. Well, let me point out, if Social Security and Medicare can be successfully attacked, as Obama is now openly and on paper proposing to do, then all of the entitlements are in mortal danger. And if you attack where the political consensus is greatest, that these things have to be maintained, if you break through on that, then after that, things like food stamps, unemployment benefits, Head Start, WIC, and things like that, S-chip, they are going to be child's play to attack and destroy. So now let's look a little bit more about this budget from Obama. one of the groups that Obama is attacking, let's just see it in terms of numbers, because the numbers are very impressive. It is thought that there are about 39 million people getting Social Security right now, and almost all of them are getting Medicare at the same time. Now, who are these people? It's not just old people. Remember, Social Security has components. There's an old age pension. Okay. There's a disability pension. Suppose you've been maimed or crippled on a dangerous job. You get Social Security disability. With the change CPI, those benefits would be eroded and attrited and cut over time, so that by the time you got to age 92, if you retired at 65, I guess, or 66, and you got yourself to 92, you would have lost 1 full month of benefits per year as a result of what Obama's talking about. So the old, the disabled, there's also a survivor's benefit. Widows, widowers, and orphans get a survivor's benefit. Obama wants to attack them. And veterans. The veterans are about 3.2 million disabled veterans who get Social Security benefits. So we're into the 40 to 45 million area, and this is the group, these are the groups that Obama proposes to attack. Now, I can imagine a plethora of photo opportunities of, again, the elderly, the disabled, coming in their wheelchairs and on crutches and so forth, the survivors' benefits, the widows, the orphans, the paraplegics, and then the disabled war veterans, the single, double, triple, quadruple amputees coming forward, the ones that the society claims to care so much about. These are the ones that Obama wants to attack. These are the people who will be hit. And you can see that the cultural and moral effect of this is to essentially, it destroys the moral fiber of a country that is willing to do that. Of course, it also destroys the political cohesion of the Democratic Party. Maybe we shouldn't worry too much about that, although we don't want the Democratic Party to collapse first. We want the Republicans to collapse first, and that's what Obama is threatening us with. So the savings, right? We're told these are savings that lead to reforms, reforms that lead to savings, in quotation marks. It ranges from a high estimate of $220 billion over 10 years to $130 billion, which is a lower estimate, and part of it has to do with to what degree is there some protection for precisely these groups, the very old, the disabled, the survivors, the widows, the orphans, the cripples, the maimed, and so forth, the paraplegics. But don't kid yourself. Some fig leaves of protection may be built in for those groups. But according to the American Association of Retired Persons, this will hit the oldest, people who have been on Social Security the longest, who generally don't have any other source of income or very little, will be hit hard. The poorest will be hit hard because they're the ones who have fewer other resources. Women, as we pointed out in the past week or so, women have been disproportionately targeted by this because they earn less during their careers. They rely on it more. Poverty is common, even as it is today. Poverty is common among the elderly. There are 9% of those over 65, I believe, who are considered below the poverty line, right? And the poverty line, as you know, is minimal. And then 5.7% who are near poor. So 15% poor and near poor of the people who are going to be getting cut. The way in which it's done is also maybe worth talking about. The chained consumer price index. Now, they've even called it the superlative consumer price index. What is this and where does it come from? Back in the year 2002, in the full hysteria of 9/11. Maybe there's a connection here. We can look at Boston and the chain CPI. The initiation of a data series known as the Chained Consumer Price Index goes back to 2002. Mad Dog Bush and the neocon gang, at the height of their powers, said, we're going to have a new data series, and we want to have that available so that it can be used for calculations, right? We won't do anything with it. The Labor Department calculates a number of these data series. One of them is called the CPI-W. The CPI-W seems to be the one that is used right now when they calculate the cost of living adjustment to Social Security and these other forms. It is the urban wage earner and clerical worker data series. But Peter Peterson, the austerity ghouls, Obama, Lou, and of course Republicans and many right-wing Democrats say this CPI-W is no good because it overstates inflation. It claims that there's more inflation than there really is. And the key part of this is the substitution effect. In other words, if you can't afford steak and you buy corned beef hash, they say that's no different. That's the same. So therefore, if you can fall back from the steak category or from a better cut of steak to a poorer cut of steak, and then you're going to fall down to hamburger and then down to, Spam or something like this, scrapple, then it's all meat, they say. So you shouldn't be compensated for that. That should be cut out of the data series. Now, the Labor Department's Consumer Price Index, CPI-W, measures 211 categories of buying and selling. As I've pointed out, this was already tampered with by Michael Boskin back in 1996 under Clinton, and he tried to doctor it as much as he could, but they're coming back now for a second bite at this apple. So that is what it looks like. It's a transparent effect to gouge and to chisel this benefit over time. And we'll be back in just a minute on Unbound Radio. Welcome back to Unbound Radio. This is Webster Tarpley reporting to you from Washington, D.C., the Webster Tarpley program coming at you. So, to sum up what we have discussed, the Boston events, assuming the worst case scenario, the false flag route, would have been an attempt to divert from anti-austerity activism, to lead people into a blind alley, in the same way that the school shootings have led to this fundamentally asinine, futile conflict, the clash between the gun fetishists and the gun demonizers, a wedge issue of the most classic type, and increasing the cohesion of the Democrats and the Republicans when what we want to do is the opposite. The only way to regard this, then, is the only way to resist it is to refuse to be diverted. The purpose of these events in general is to try to suppress mass strike protests, mass strike actions beyond protest, towards rollback of austerity, the institution of a recovery program, and a Wall Street sales tax, make the Wall Street banks pay for the depression, and then ultimately the key to the recovery, which is to begin seizing pieces of the Federal Reserve and forcing them to finance large parts of the recovery. Now, just about this, we got an interesting interview, a guy called, I think his name is Rosenstein. He's one of the governors of the Federal Reserve, and he points out that what has been done by the Fed up to now is not enough. So he essentially argues that there should be more QE3. And I would say, well, you're correct that the methods done so far have not worked, right? The consumer-led recovery of the stimulus and the supplemental of Pelosi and company, they did not work, although they had some positive effects as long as they lasted, did not generate a self-sustaining recovery. And certainly everything the Fed has done, the hot money measures, especially of QE 1, 2, and 3, have simply increased hot money. So the answer has to be to open a new Fed window for a credit stimulus of, a round figure, $3.6 trillion to finance the entire shovel-ready panoply of infrastructure projects here in the United States. So that's the answer to the debate that's going on inside the Federal Reserve. But just the fact that it's going on is an opening. And you always want to go where an opening is. People want to do Glass-Steagall. That would be okay. It might be easier if you had a bill to revise Dodd-Frank that might include the Glass-Steagall. But that you don't have. What you have instead is a budget bill. Taxes, entitlements, deficits, money in that sense. And that is where the Wall Street sales tax is indispensable. Without the Wall Street sales tax, I don't see how you get out of this, right? 11 European countries will have it. France and Italy and Hungary do have it, and we want it here. Now, in this context, before the Boston news arrived on Monday afternoon, Rush Limbaugh and his national program, old Rush of the Institute for Retarded Reactionary Ranting, he was on vacation, and he had a guy filling in for him, Doug Urbanski. Seems to be some kind of actor or Hollywood personality. I'm sure others know more about this than I do. At about 1:15 in the afternoon, Eastern Daylight Time on Monday, Doug Urbanski began attacking the financial transaction tax. My God, there it was. The Wall Street sales tax under attack on the Rush Limbaugh show. And he began saying, this is a very bad thing. This is a terrible idea. They're taxing everything, and where will it stop? Why they even want to tax financial transactions? Then a program break, and Urbanski dropped the theme. And I can imagine people in his control room, right? Maybe that Snurdly that Limbaugh always seems to be talking to said, drop that theme. Let sleeping dogs lie, right? The American sucker population does not realize that Wall Street pays no taxes. The whole tax debate ignores the fact that the Wall Street zombie bankers pay little to no corporate income tax, not 35%, but more like 0 to 3 to 5%. And at the same time, on the quadrillions of turnover, they pay absolutely nothing. So I say this is the way to go. Once the American people realize that Wall Street pays zero, there is a vehement desire to make them pay through the nose, and 1% is a good starting point, although many would say, no, let them pay the full sales tax of the state that they're operating in. So from 1% on up, if you want. Radical solutions are always useful if they skew the debate in the proper direction, because speculation is an evil, and 1% is a good start, but maybe that's not enough. And we're looking for $1 trillion of revenue, $500 billion for the feds, $500 billion for the states. If we had the Wall Street sales tax, there'd be enough cops in Boston so that the marathon could be fully policed. So Democrats are seeing themselves mocked. Obama's using them as a prop. It's time for them to fight back with the Wall Street sales tax and then the progressive nationalization of the Federal Reserve. So don't get distracted. Keep your eyes on the prize. We have a strategy. Don't be deflected. Don't be diverted. And we'll see